So let's get started. I'm Dr. Carrie Mendoza. I'm part of Nurture Neighbors, and I'm here with Ted Dabrowski. And we wanted to do this webinar just to give an update on COVID in our area. Ted's going to go through some numbers related to all the policy work he does through Wirepoints.
Thanks everybody for joining. And what we wanted to do, I think I spoke about this. I don't know if it's been a couple months ago. And we are at Nurture Neighbors, of course, we're big proponents of getting the schools open and giving parents and students more options. Today, I think everybody has an option of what they want, except for those that want in-person schooling, because they're the only ones that can't have it. And so what we wanted to do is review a little bit the situation with COVID, because that of course is the driving issue here. And I want to start by just saying, about a month ago, August 11th it was, I wrote a piece about saying that it's not cases that matter. Actually, cases don't matter. What matters are hospitalizations and deaths. And those are the two metrics that we really should be following. And when I wrote that piece, a lot of people warned me, saying, hey, look, these cases are way up. These deaths and hospitalizations are coming. And again, I'm not trying to say I'm going to be right or wrong about that. What I'm saying is what we need to track are those two numbers, hospitalizations and deaths, and not cases. Well, it turns out a month later, we're still waiting for those hospitalizations and deaths to come. They've never come. And so I want to touch on that. But before I do, I just want to have a reminder slide that I think sets the tone for why we think Nutria should open, and open as soon as possible, and experiment. And the whole thing starts with that the goal of being careful about COVID when this whole thing started was about flattening the curve. It was all about making sure that we didn't overwhelm our hospitals, and that's something that Carrie has seen in the hospitals. We didn't want to overwhelm them, and so what we needed to do is, instead of having a situation where we have this massive spike, as evidenced by the red part of the curve, where we had so many cases that the hospitals were overwhelmed. We had people dying because we couldn't control it. And what it was, we said, is let's just shut down the economy. Let's lock down a lot of things so that we can spread out the cases. It wasn't to eliminate them, because you can't, until we get a vaccine or some form of protection, we can't get rid of that problem. So all we can do is spread it out over time so that we can be controlled about it. We can be smart about it. We can use measures that we've been using to slow things down. And we have, in Illinois, after a very, very tough period at the beginning, we have done that. I think, if you look at the numbers, we did a lot better than a lot of other states. And so we can't keep forgetting this, because we can't get rid of COVID until we find a vaccine. So we can't, I guess the word is, we can't hide from it. It's there. All we can do is manage it so it doesn't manage us. And we've done that in Illinois. And I think it's a shame that we continue to, I think, use the terms cases all the time, and case positivity, to put a lot of fear, what I consider putting a lot of fear into people that I think is not justified. So let me back what I'm saying up with some data. So this goes back to the early periods of the crisis. This is a graph of Illinois. These are the daily deaths per 1 million residents. So at one point, for every million residents, we had spiked up to 10. And that was among the highest in the country. Nothing like New Jersey and New York and Massachusetts and that area, but far higher than many other states. And I compared this at the beginning of this graphic to the states that have had a crisis in recent, let's call it 2 months: Florida, Arizona, Texas, and whichever is the fourth. We'll see it in a minute. Well, so those states were much better than us, right? If you look at the green, they were having one death per 1 million. We were having 10. We're having 10 times the number of deaths as whichever state will reveal that in a second. And those other states were having 2, 3, 4. So we had a huge problem. But over time, you can see that our red line, Illinois, started to come way down, and our deaths came down. And you can see that Illinois continued down this trajectory to where we got far better, down to 1 and 2 deaths for every million residents. In the states of Georgia, Texas, Florida, and Arizona, they skyrocketed up here, right? They all jumped up because they had their wave. Now they're all coming back down, but you can see that they still have a higher death rate than us. The point of me showing this graphic is that we suffered a lot early on in the crisis. And through one of the strictest lockdowns, and there's been a lot of debate about the lockdowns and what it's done to jobs and all that. And it's still very, very strict. But the point about this flattening the curve is that we flattened the curve. We actually succeeded in whatever way you want to say it. The curve is flat. And as Carrie, I think, mentioned, the hospitals aren't having a bunch of cases, not where she is, and we're way down in terms of hospitalizations. So we should be taking advantage of the fact that we flattened the curve so well, so that we can get our kids back to school. And Carrie, if you need to hop in with any questions or anything, since I can't see them. Now, this is the status of where we are most recently, September 9th. So this is as of yesterday. We have had 8,200 deaths in Illinois. And you can see it's tragic. It's in the elderly. The majority is in the 60 and older crowd. The people that are in the school crowd down here in the lower than 60 and the kids are faring far, far better. And so really this has been a crisis of the elderly. We'll come to comorbidities in a second, but that's the problem. The crisis is here. And how do I protect my mother? My mom's 80. And I follow as many rules as I can. I am cautious. We haven't hugged in whatever this is, 6 months, no hug. But I'm smart there. You got to be smart on where you manage risk. But I think we need to be a lot smarter down here where, in the whole state, we've had 6 deaths under the age of 20. And if I have it right, and I can't remember if I have the stats here, but at least 3 or 4 of them had comorbidities. So the kids are not at risk. Those 6 deaths are sad, but when you look at it overall, there's many, many more flu deaths this year than COVID deaths for the kids. So this is where we have to be smarter. Our young teachers are not at risk. Of course, every time you move up into an age bracket 10 years more, there's a little bit more risk. But even then, the risk across the whole state is low. And what we'll see is that most of these people, 99 out of 10, will have had some comorbidity or more than maybe even 2 or 3 comorbidities. So we know who those people, those people know who they are. Those are the people at risk. And those are the people we need to manage around. They need to manage for themselves, and then we need to be smart about how we do the schools to take care of them. Now, what's also missing from all the statistics that you don't hear often enough, sadly, is that 55% of all COVID deaths in this state were linked to retirement homes. So, and quite a few, Glenview itself had a lot of COVID deaths, but they were retirement home deaths largely. And so you've got a whole bunch of places where the crisis is really a retirement home crisis. It's a crisis where we didn't take care of our retirement homes. And if you cut out the retirement home problem, you cut out half the deaths. It's a fascinating thing, and it's sad. But the reality is that it got to a lot of the unhealthy elderly people, and they were the victims. So you have to take into account this chart and this chart, and understand that younger and the children and younger adults are at very low risk. So let me just bring up this comorbidities thing because it's so important. And if you go, and forgive me for having a slightly older slide, I got the wrong number. We have a newer slide, but this is from end of July. 90% of all, this is for Cook County. The state won't publish the comorbidity data, and we've asked them to, and they just won't share it. Fortunately, the Cook County Examiner has all the deaths for COVID among all the deaths in the website, their website. And so we were able to go in and we grabbed it. Anybody can go in and get it, and it's sad and it's fascinating at the same time because you can see all the COVID deaths and how many of them, over 90%, have 2 or 3 or 5 or 7 comorbidities. So a lot of times it's really unhealthy people. So again, all of our policies for opening schools can be smart about that. People who have comorbidities, underlying causes, online learning, they can be the teachers, they can be coaches outside, they can do online classes. but we can manage it. The point is we can manage it. When you take the low number of deaths, when you take the fact that teachers, especially the younger ones, are at very low risk, and then we know those people who have comorbidities and we can manage around that, it starts to remove all the barriers from opening up schools. So let me just belabor this one point on cases don't matter, hospitalizations and deaths do. And I think this is so important because I think the case increase in Arizona and Florida and even in Illinois, you know, I struggle because I don't like the fact that the press, the governor, and many other people lead with this case number. And the cases just, I don't want to say they don't matter, but they don't matter. Let me show you here. So this graphic shows the cases we had in Illinois through June. And on June 18th, they were at their low point of 596 cases. We thought we were doing well. And after that, cases started to rise again, in line with what was happening in a lot of other places. And today, those cases are 4 times higher than they were at our low point. And this is what drove a lot of fear for a lot of at least allowed a lot of excuses for not opening schools. And you see this cases go from 600 a day to over 2,000 a day. So 4 times more. I guess it's really not. Let's see, whatever. It's 3 point something more. Maybe rounds to 4. But let's look at what happened to hospitalizations from June 18th. Right? You know, there's a little bit of a time lag between cases and hospitalizations and all that. So, but from June 18th, hospitalizations are down by 400. And if you look, maybe, you know, there's a little dip down here and back up, but hospitalizations, we never had the crisis that everybody warned about. Same thing with deaths. June 18th, we were averaging 50 daily deaths. This is the 7-day rolling average, 50. And since then, we've bumped along at whatever that might be, 15 to 18, 15 to 20. They never came. And yet, you know, I think sadly, we have kept our kids at home, subjecting them to a very tough time, subjecting the parents to a very tough time, those who are, you know, working parents or dual working parents who couldn't take care of their kids. We've made a real struggle for you know, the people in the New Trier area. And what's also been interesting is that we haven't had deaths in our area. I think it's now 3 months. So we had 6 deaths, and this is in the New Trier High School boundaries. We've had 6 deaths in Wilmette, but they were all free about 3 months ago, or earlier. Northfield 1, Winnetka 1, and then Glenview itself as a city had quite a few deaths because of the retirement homes. But the last review we did of the part that's in the school district boundaries, no deaths. So we're talking about a very limited situation in our own area. And I think you know, I think the numbers bear that out. So with all that, you know, what is everybody else doing? And I tried to look around the country, and I put a link down here at the bottom of this. So I think this is being recorded, and we'll post it. And those of you who want to look at what other states are doing, it was interesting. The 2 of our neighbors. I can't read here, so let me hide this. So, you know, you got Iowa. Every student, the governor said every student's required to spend at least half of their schooling inside classrooms. Districts must also provide online classes for parents who demand it. There again is the choice that they've been given in Iowa. Yes, a lot of people wanted online learning. And by definition, New Trier gave everybody online learning. But those who wanted an option for in-person didn't get it. In Iowa, they did. Same thing in Missouri. Same thing in Texas. Same thing in Florida. These states that are in yellow, they all have, that means the school districts are allowed to decide. So it's much like Illinois, pretty broad. But I think the problem we have in Illinois, or certainly in New Trier, is that we didn't give those who really wanted in-person learning an option. We left them out. I had a very interesting discussion with a parent over at Sears today, and I thought it was fascinating. Sears has done, I don't know the school district, I'm in Wilmette, but they've done what I think a lot of parents wish the rest of the district had done. Now, to be fair, The school district's very small. It's a one school district. Their numbers aren't huge, some 500, 600 students. And they've been able to do something. But what they did is they decided they would tackle it. 5 days a week, the kids are in school. Each kid has their own entrance, or each class or grade has their own entrance. They've created these bubbles so that the bubbles are together. You know, they have special bathrooms that each group has to use. They figured out how to manage the movement of people. Parents did have to pick. You have to pick a lane. Either you're in school or you're remote. And I think that was pretty neat. So that way they can have two systems going at the same time and not keep messing one of the other systems up. And only 10% of the kids or parents, 10% of the school population chose to stay at home. And what I like about this is that they went ahead and said, we're going to experiment. They didn't experiment small, they actually experimented big. But they've gone for it. Things apparently are going well. There's been no sign of a problem, haven't heard of one. And you know, I commend Kenilworth for taking it on and giving it a big shot. And I think that kind of comes back to New Trier. We should have experimented with at least some in person, some amount, and we didn't. I think that's going to make it harder and harder to ever get started. Kenilworth is now going to have a huge head start at experimentation, at trying things, what worked, what didn't. And the longer we wait, the harder it is, especially when we enter into the colder months. Last thing I think I have here is, I found this fascinating. For those of you who've been following the news, the archdiocese has been strongly trying to open up their schools, and they have. And of course, it hasn't come without hiccups, but they've done that. And let me start the other way around. You know, I was curious. You know, these archdiocese teachers, I looked at their salary schedule because, you know, I know that it's a tough job teaching. It's a demanding job, but I know that the archdiocese makes a lot less. And so I got a hold of their salary schedule. And if you look at the steps here are, let's take it as roughly the number of years worked. So after you've worked nearly 30 years, and then across here is if you have a bachelor's plus 15 hours towards your master's, bachelor's plus 24 hours towards your master's, and et cetera, and then you get a PhD. Well, if you look at the top of the scale of the archdiocese teacher, they make about $59,000. Now, there's some other stuff. A lot of private schools collect money at the end of the year from the parents, and they get bonuses and things like that. But this is the salary schedule, and this is what a archdiocese teacher gets at the top end. That is, now here's the New Trier salary schedule. That high-end salary is the starting salary for a bachelor's at New Trier. And then, of course, you see that the long-term workers, leader teachers, et cetera, you're talking about $130,000, $140,000. Now, I show this to create tension, but, you know, we pay a lot of money in New Trier for our teachers. And that's, again, because we demand a great product. And, I've always said that, you know, I walk in and I sit down with a New Trier teacher, and they're so professional. They're so good. They know how to manage parents. They know how to manage kids. So I get it. But by the same token, we pay a lot for that product. And that product we get today is not that product. Today, my son has to sit in front of he's a ninth grader. He has to sit in front of a screen. I'm a fan of online learning per se. I'm not a fan of forced online learning that's all day in the way it's being done now, even if it's a lot better than it was in the spring. What we're doing, I think, to our kids is wrong, and I think it's creating more and more problems. And so I share all this because I do believe that the New Trier administration needs a lot more pressure from parents, especially those who want to see more in-person learning. We pay a lot. The service we're getting, the product we're getting is not the product we paid for. The situation in Illinois and in New Trier is far better. I think the risks are far better understood. This is not 6 months ago. We flattened the curve, and it's time that the New Trier administration, I think, really take a relook at that complex metrics-based opening plan. Simplify it. Let's get going. Let's open. Let's get our kids. You know, this is our kids' lives, and as parents, we need, as the elder statespeople of New Trier, we need to be smart. Let them have their day. We need to protect ourselves, move out of the way, and let them grow and let them flourish. With that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Yeah, and I guess in a similar vein, someone asked, which group, specifically teachers, school board, school administrators, students, or parents support reopening and which are against in-person learning?
Yeah, I think one of the telling things, if you look at from a public policy perspective, is that when the talk of reopening schools and in-person started happening, the unions nationally and in Illinois started flexing their muscle and said, we're going to strike if that happens. And that's really unfair, I think, and it puts the board in a very difficult situation because boards don't like strikes. They're messy, they're noisy, and the board would rather not have that. Unfortunately for the parents is that the parents aren't collectivized in that way. They don't have that same power to strike and to say, okay, we're not gonna. I mean, I guess all parents could say, well, we're not gonna log on all next week in protest. But it's very difficult to organize. Parents are working. Parents are dispersed, and so what makes it really hard though are these collective bargaining rules, these collective bargaining laws, where the unions in Illinois, and I think I mentioned this the last call, they have the power to strike. And only I think it's 12 states out of the 50 have the power to strike, but none of our neighboring states have the power to strike. Only Illinois does. And I think it's just an unfair power, in particular during COVID, where they can threaten that, because again, parents are left without the proper schooling. They're paying the full taxes. New Trier has not offered to give us a 10%, 15%, 20% discount. And they haven't said, well, we're going to give you less schooling, so therefore we're going to give you some money back. None of that. And the teachers, the unions, the school district continue to extract the same property tax dollars from us. When in fact, perhaps I'd like to use some of that money where I'm not getting the service that I want to buy some tutoring from somebody, maybe send my son to a class or to a music lesson or whatever it might be to fill the time. But I wasn't offered that. And I think that's another unfair aspect of this that parents need to take into account. And I think the board should take this into account. But I think we've learned enough, and this is the hard part. We've learned enough. We've all been doing this now for 6 months, and we know who's at risk. We know how to take care of each other. We know that our kids are out there playing with other kids. They're not getting ill. They're not dying. It's time that we collectively, and the teachers know this too. It's time that we collectively begin and demand. Yeah, I guess somebody said let's organize or let's quit talking, but I think it's true.